Barhapidam natavaravapu karnayo karnikaram bibradvasa kanakakapisham vaijayantim chamalam randranveno radharasudaya purayan gopavrunde vrindaranyam Svapadaramanam pravishad gita kirti. Shri Swami Bhagwan ni jai, Akshara Purushottam Maharaj ni jai, Gunatitanand Swami Maharaj ni jai, Radha Krishna Deva ni jai, Siyavara Ramachandra Bhagavan ni jai, Umapati Mahadeva ni jai, Guru Hari Pramukh Swami Maharaj ni jai, Mahant Swami Maharaj ni jai, London Mandir Rajat Jayanti Mahotsav ni jai. Namaste and Jai Swaminarayan. Welcome to another edition of Timeless Hindu Wisdom. We've been looking at numerous shastras in this series. This time we'll be diving deep into the Shrimad Bhagwat Puran. Of the numerous shastras in our library of Hinduism, Vyasji is considered the OG, the original guru. He is the one who has written most of the shastras in our Hindu library. He wrote the 18 Purans describing the Ishvar avatars and the various devs that control this universe for Bhagwan, of which the 18th Puran is known as the Shrimad Bhagwat Puran. Bhagwan Swaminarayan even refers to the Shrimad Bhagwat Puran on several occasions during his talks that are referenced in the Shastra of the Swaminarayan Sampradaya, the Vachnamrit. The Shrimad Bhagwat Puran consists of 18,000 Sanskrit verses called shloks, split into 12 sections. Each section is known as a skand. Then there are chapters within each skand. The Sanskrit verse that we sang at the beginning as a Mangalacharan prayer is from the 21st chapter within the 10th skand of the Shrimad Bhagwat Puran. And this chapter, where this shlok is famously known as Venu Geet. Venu means flute and Geet means song. So Venu Geet is the song of the flute. This specific verse describes Ishvar Avatar Sri Krishna Bhagwan entering into the Vrindavan forest while playing harmonious melodies on his divine flute. It's particularly famous and important for many reasons. One being the famous Sant Shukdevji hears it while he's running through the forest. Shukdevji is running from home, finally able to escape lockdown and just wants to get away and not be bound down by anyone or anything. But while he's running through the forest, he hears young students who are gathering logs for their homeschooling class singing this verse along with several others. Ironically, they're singing verses that were taught to them and written by Shukdevji's father, Vyasji. Hearing this verse, Shukdevji experiences an immense amount of joy. Joy that until now he did not experience even from the knowledge of the Atma, his true self. He thinks to himself, this experience of hearing of the description of Paramatma is even greater than the joy of the experience of the Atma. This is the greatest joy possible. So we have 3 levels of happiness explained here. The first and the lowest level is where we seek happiness from outside material and objects and achievements. And the second level, one level up, is where we turn inside to focus on the Atma and we experience joy from our true self. And the third level, the highest level, is where we experience immense joy. The joy that Bhagwan has to offer, which is above all other joy. Bhagwan, who is outside everywhere and inside each and every one of us, always. So the three levels that we have are the non-Atma, the Atma, and Paramatma. The backdrop from where we will begin is the profound spirituality embedded within the simple symbolism of Krishna Bhagwan's life. This becomes uniquely apparent when we approach the two Shastras that describe Sri Krishna Bhagwan's life in detail. First, we have the Shrimad Bhagwat Puran, which we'll be looking at over the next few sessions. And secondly, we have the Mahabharata, which we saw in previous sessions. Many scholars of the Shrimad Bhagwat Puran and the Mahabharata teach that each of these Shastras represent two different aspects of Sri Krishna Bhagwan. The Shrimad Bhagwat Puran describes the first part of Sri Krishna Bhagwan's life, whereas the Mahabharata focuses on the second part of his life. But both describe the two roles that Sri Krishna Bhagwan takes on during two distinct stages of his life. In the Shrimad Bhagwat Puran, the first part of Krishna Bhagwan's life, Vyasji focuses on narrating the agricultural setting of Gokul, and in the Mahabharata, he focuses on the urban setting of Mathura. In the Bhagwat Puran, we're exposed to the lush forests of Vrindavan, the field of friends, and in the Mahabharata, we find ourselves in the barren open land of Kurukshetra, the field of enemies. In the Bhagavad, the focus is Krishna Bhagwan's playful pastime, and in the Mahabharata, the focus is his political endeavors. In the Bhagavad, we see Krishna Bhagwan climb onto a kadamba tree while he's playing, and in the Mahabharata, we see him climb onto a chariot during the battle. In the Bhagavad, we see Krishna Bhagwan spending time among gopis, cows, and village folk, and in the Mahabharata, Krishna Bhagwan spends a lot of time amongst kings, warriors, and nobility. In the Bhagavad, Krishna Bhagwan is surrounded by milk and love, and in the Mahabharata, Krishna Bhagwan is surrounded by blood and war. The Shrimad Bhagwat Puran shows us Krishna Bhagwan with his flute and peacock feather, the Morli and Morpeach. And the Mahabharata shows us Krishna Bhagwan with the conch shell and circular disc, the Shankh and Sudarshan. This last point is the point of imagery of Krishna Bhagwan that we'll be focusing on, and is arguably one of the most famous images of Krishna Bhagwan that we see, him playing the flute. This sacred image of Krishna Bhagwan with his flute is the one we'll be focusing on. Bhagwan Swaminarayan, in describing Sri Krishna Bhagwan, says that in understanding Bhagwan and looking towards Bhagwan's life, Bhagwan's actions may show various roles and stages that we compartmentalize to analyze and understand Bhagwan a little better, but Bhagwan's Svarup is one and the same. It's always unchanged. In the Venugit, Vyasji describes a conversation that ensues amongst the gopis. The gopis vividly personify the flute, to the point where they even begin to feel a tad bit jealous. They pose the question to each other, why does Krishna Bhagwan not leave this flute even for 1 second? Krishna Bhagwan is never seen without his flute. And what did this small piece of wood do to be able to enjoy Krishna Bhagwan's company so dearly? There's a Gujarati poem that describes the subtle answers to the gopis' inquiry. It consists of 4 lines. The first line is, Vindavu pare ne, Vindavu pare, Bhagya pela vasalarine, Vindavu pare. Vindavu parere ene Vindavu pare. Vagya pela vasalarine Vindavu pare. Before being able to produce a sweet sound, the flute has to endure a whole lot. the flute has to tolerate. Before it can be sent to Sri Krishna Bhagwan, the flute has to tolerate before it can send people into a musical trance. So first, we'll look at the virtue of tolerance that is necessary to please Bhagwan. Even to live harmoniously in our own homes, a little bit of tolerance is required. The challenge is sort of like if you were to buy a toy train for your child or your young cousin. We go to the store, we dish out the cash, we take the item and bring it home, and then our eyes catch the small fine print on the box that says, batteries not included. Just like any relationship. We made the purchase, but we didn't realize batteries were supposed to be installed. In any relationship, we didn't expect that we had to tolerate. Tolerating is the batteries of any relationship. It's something that we didn't expect was expected of us when we made the purchase, but now we must insert tolerance into our relationships. Otherwise, just like the toy train, it ain't going to go anywhere. It'll just sit there, collect dust, and eventually get thrown away. The relationship of two depends upon the tolerance of one, whether it's between siblings, husband and wife, parents and sons and daughters, between grandparents and grandchildren. And now, in this time of COVID-19, when we're spending much more time than required with our loved ones, this virtue of tolerance is actually become a necessity. Sometimes it's us who are tolerating others, and sometimes it's others who are tolerating us. My guru and the guru of BAPS, Mahan Swami Maharaj, insightfully guides us and says, it's we who should be tolerating others instead of others having to tolerate us. What does this mean, to tolerate? And how can we learn to tolerate a little bit more? This is explained in the second line of the Gujarati poem. Vagadani vatene tap karyata Shiyaro unaro ene chomasu nare Vagya pela vasalarine vindavu pare. Vagadani vate ene tapa karyata Shiyaro unaro ene chomasu nade. Shiaro, Unaro, and Chomasu. The three seasons of winter, summer, and monsoon. The bamboo plant is minding his own business, but quickly realizes it has to learn to tolerate the changing weather and can't do anything about it. Just like we have to learn to accept the changes that take place outside of us, the things that are out of our control. Sri Krishna Bhagwan says to Arjun in the Srimad-Bhagavata, Matra sparshastu konteya, shitoshna sukha dukkada, agama paino nityas, tan stitikshasva bharata. He says to Arjun, tan stitikshasva, learn to tolerate. What does Arjun need to tolerate in the battlefield? Krishna Bhagwan explains, anityaha. Everything around you in this world is constantly changing. It's temporary. And it's out of your control. Shitoshna agama painoho. Just like the seasons of winter and summer, they come and go. Sukha dukkada. In the same way, all the joy and sorrow that you feel and experience comes and goes. That's what you need to tolerate. So, there are things out of our control, but our emotions and feelings towards them are the things that are constantly changing, and we need to be able to handle them. So Krishna Bhagwan is explaining to us that you can't control what's happening to you, but you can control the reaction of what's happening to you. So don't get too excited when things are going your way, and don't get too upset when things are going the other way. One day your mom makes you pizza and chili paneer, and the next day she may make you karelanu shak. One day your football team, Liverpool or Man United, wins, and the next day they play as if they didn't even show up to play. They lose horribly, embarrassingly. Good things happen, bad things happen. Sometimes you get what you want, and sometimes you get what you definitely don't want. The Gujarati poem uses the word nade. In other words, obstacles come, and they will come, but they become a challenge, and they can be seen as a challenge to improve. Tolerating is a challenge, but it's referred to in our Shastras as tap. It's a penance. In other words, you grow from it, sort of like exercise. If you exercise regularly, that is. Even at home, you can exercise regularly. But it's not the most pleasant experience initially. It's time-consuming, and you're sweating by the end of it. You're tired afterwards. But if you do it regularly with a positive mindset, you know that this exercising is making you stronger. It's making you healthier. So just as penance makes you stronger, and exercising makes you stronger, tolerating makes you stronger, just like exercise. We have to gradually try and increase our threshold of tolerance. You have to continuously work on your tolerance muscles, just like exercise. And that's why tolerance, when you think of it positively, is called fortitude. The root word of fortitude is forte, which is a French word and also Italian word, which means strength. Tolerance is for the strong. Even in music notation, when we write a small f, or if you see a small f when you're playing music, the small f means forte, which means when you see this small note, this small letter underneath the note, you have to play that note a little bit loudly, or rather, strongly. And if you see two f's next to each other, that means fortissimo, which means that note needs to be played very strongly. And when you see three f's next to each other, that's fortissimo, which means very, very strongly. Even in English, when we say playing football is not his forte, but playing video game football is his forte. And during this lockdown, maybe people have turned to learning how to cook. So we would say cooking is not his forte, but eating is his forte. And sleeping definitely is his forte. So during this lockdown, you also may have kids in the house trying to learn an instrument. At least they're trying, but it's still just noise if they're still learning. And sometimes it's excruciatingly painful noise. And all the other people in the house don't have a choice, but they have to up their tolerance levels. And if you're unable to do so, then you may be thinking to yourself, my son or daughter playing this piano is the pandemic. The other pandemic of COVID I can handle. Right now, during COVID-19, to increase our immunity, you may be taking CBD. Wait, I'm not talking about anything else, but I'm talking about vitamin C, vitamin B, and vitamin D. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're thinking, but vitamin C we take to increase our immunity. Vitamin B we take to prevent the feeling of fatigue and being tired. Vitamin D we take to strengthen ourselves from within, starting from our bones. So just like when we take vitamins to strengthen ourselves and increase our immunity to the outside factors that may influence us in a negative way, we have to fortify ourselves so we can handle when things don't go our way. The key ingredient that separates tolerating with fortitude and tolerating with self-pity is intent. Fortitude is a trait of healthy people who tolerate out of self-pride, rather than feeling forced to tolerate out of self-pity. Snehmuni Swami Maharaj coincidentally enjoyed playing the flute when he was young. His name at the time of taking Diksha and becoming a sadhu was Keshav Jivan Das, just as Keshav is one of the many names of Sri Krishna Bhagwan. When Snehmuni Swami Maharaj was in high school prior to becoming a sadhu, he enjoyed taking part also in the extracurricular activity of boxing. Side note, has it ever occurred to you Why is a boxing ring a square? If it's going to be called a ring, shouldn't it be a round circle? Back to our story. Mahant Swami Maharaj often gives a unique perspective regarding the sport of boxing. To win, you can't just practice giving punches. You have to also practice taking punches. So Mahant Swami Maharaj says, the person who wins is not necessarily the person who can give the strongest punch, but often the person who wins is the person who can take the strongest punch. So a boxer doesn't feel any self-pity after being badly bruised during a practice, because they know that each and every one of these bruises are the very things that will make me stronger and give me the fortitude to win. So they see these punches that they're taking, the bruises that show up afterwards, after the practice, as a means to become stronger. They see it as fortitude, as a way to become stronger, to win. And that leads us to the third line of the Gujarati poem. Achanak ek dine to karigar ne haathe avi angara vindhana ena sarane chare Vagya pela vasalarine vindhavu pare. Achanak ek din eto karigar ne haathe avi angara vindhana ena sarane chare. It's describing a craftsman coming along, cutting the bamboo plant, uprooting it, and taking it home for more processing. And then what happens to our flute? To find out, we'll have to wait and see in the next session. Till then, we can try infusing into our mindset the first trait of tolerating, fortitude, tolerating with a positive mindset. By reminding ourselves, tolerating is actually a strength and not a weakness. It's fortitude, not frailty. Till then, Jai Swaminarayan, Namaste, and have a nice day. Have a pleasant evening and peaceful evening. Stay safe, stay strong. We have one question that has come. You spoke of tolerance, and I know it's nice to tolerate, but should I be tolerating even at the workplace and university and allow people to tread all over me and use me as a doormat? A good, practical question. Our Hindu Shastras don't say to tolerate to the point where people will be taking advantage of you or walking all over you. The more we study our Shastras, the more we realize how practical the solutions within them are and help us live our life practically as well. Krishna Bhagwan promised in the Srimad-Bhagavata to tolerate. I will tolerate, he said, I will tolerate 100 mistakes of Shishupal. But even after tolerating this much, Shishupal was not willing to change his ways. Similarly, we have to decide that this is how much I am willing to tolerate. This is how much I'm going to try and tolerate. We have to set the boundaries. Then, after the 100 mistakes, Krishna allowed Shishupal's karma to take over. And Shishupal received the fruits of his karma. So our Shastras never tell us to have false tolerance, tolerating just for the sake of tolerating. They guide us to tolerate with confidence and being proud of who we are. Thus, we use the words fortitude and tolerating for a higher purpose, to please God. Krishna Bhagwan tells Arjun in the Srimad-Bhagavata, which explains this concept very practically. He's telling him in the battlefield, you need to tolerate. Matra sparshastu Kaunteya. He uses the word Kaunteya, which means you are the son of Kunti. Then he says, Tans titikshasva Bharata. He says, you belong to the noble lineage of King Bharat. So basically, Krishna Bhagwan is explaining to Arjun that you are no ordinary person. Krishna uses these words to inspire Arjun to act out of pride for who he is. And Krishna Bhagwan is guiding Arjun to act while staying on the right side of tolerance by tolerating for the correct purpose and not allow yourself to be subjugated or taken advantage of. He's telling Arjun to tolerate shortly before he says, you need to fight in this battle. So the Srimad-Bhagavad gives a very practical, perfect balance of the two. So we need to also understand that we have to bend as much as we can, but don't bend to the point where we end up breaking. And even the breaking point for everyone is different. And obviously, studying the Shastras or hearing a talk about tolerance is to up our tolerance, going from 50% to 55%, go from 60% to 65%. We want to slowly increase our tolerance, but tolerating a toxic behavior of someone is not a virtue. So if you can't tolerate anymore, there are correct ways of getting out of the situation. Gandhiji said, an eye for an eye would leave the whole world blind. So not being able to tolerate anymore definitely doesn't mean going out and fighting with the person or getting nasty with the person harassing you or yelling back at someone even. So if you feel you need to confront someone, we need to approach them with the manner that Mahant Swami Maharaj says. When you need to confront someone, approach them and speak to them with humility and confidence, be polite and clear, and be honest and sincere. The purpose of the virtue of tolerating is so that we can live a happy and peaceful life. So like I mentioned in the talk, we need to tolerate the everyday little things that agitate us and upset us. If we were to make a list of all the things that harass us or got us upset or agitated us throughout the week, and let's say we came up with a list of 100 things. Looking at that list of 100 things, we'll notice that more than likely 90 or 95% of those things that upset us were just little things that we could have or should have tolerated. Like we're driving to work and someone cuts us off. Maybe they're in a rush to get to work and maybe they're late, or maybe they're going to the hospital even. We planned to go for a jog one day in the afternoon and it rains when it wasn't supposed to rain in the forecast. We go to pick up our groceries at the grocery store and our favorite cereal, just as we walk into the aisle, our favorite cereal, Cocoa Pops, is taken by someone right in front of our eyes. So we can tolerate these little things, and that's where tolerance is most necessary, so that we don't get agitated by the little speed bumps that slow us down. So tolerance is the ability to handle the speed bumps along the road and accepting them for where they are and just continue on with a smile. If you get into an accident, you need to go to the hospital. So may we all be able to imbibe these virtues of tolerance, unity, cooperation, and fortitude, and live a happy, harmonious life with our families, co-workers, and neighbors. Thank you.